Hello, everybody. I'm Charlie Tolhurst. Welcome to Charlie Tolhurst Show for today, the 22nd of January, live on YouTube. It is a pretty busy show tonight. All the latest news. I'm joined by late party reporter Zach Chambers to round it all up for you this Sunday night. Hello, Zach.
Hi, Charlie. Hello, mate.
Right, it's time now for a new twist to the start of my show as we go through and do news bulletin roundup. So here we go, guys. I'm now going to read out some of the main news stories that have came across over the last few days. Starting off with James Cleverly refusing to back under-fired chairman Nadeem Zahawi. The Foreign Secretary has denied that announcements this week that the funding of regional levelling up projects were about to win the next general election. Now, he was asked if Mr. Zahawi should be sacked in an interview with Camilla Tomley on GB News. Said, "I don't think it would be right for me to speculate or guess whether any further details about his tax affairs. He's an entrepreneur, he's a successful entrepreneur building a company which has paid tax, employing people that have had paid taxes. And he himself has paid tax to a considerable amount being successful. The Prime Minister has been supportive of him, and it's not just he's very successful. You remember he was the head of the vaccine task force. It comes as Nadeem Zahawi has faced pressure, including the Labour Party calling for the resignation of Zahawi. Moving on now to the next part of the next news story now, which is this one here, courtesy of state pensions now. Now, state pensions, grandparents can claim an extra £3,000 a year for helping with childcare. The scheme has been running since 2011, meaning those who have not been making use of it could receive massive payouts. It suggests that grandparents will receive that extra childcare in a huge boost. Despite suggestions the UK has passed through the worst of the cost of living crisis, many families have had to make drastic cuts to keep their spending selves and bill afloat as energy bills and price of other necessities soar. They could receive an extra £275 in credits a year by the government, which for me would be quite interesting. I have to say, certainly an interesting thought there as well. And the final news story of this little mini bulletin here is Putin issues a chilling nuclear warning to the UK as Russia begins to run out of its troops. Now, Vladimir Putin has issued a chilling threat to the United Kingdom, arguing basically that UK has been giving Russia more, Ukraine more armory. Russia, the president has responded back saying that he's issued a nuclear warning. The close ally of Russian president argued that deliveries of weapons to Kyiv threatening Russia will lead to a global catastrophe. He went on to say, make arguments used against some weapons of mass destruction indefensible. Former Deputy Prime Minister and head of Putin's presidential administration, Vitaly Volodin, said if Washington and NATO countries supply weapons used to strike civilians and attempt to threaten our territories, this will lead to retaliatory measures, including more powerful weapons. So that's the end there of that little mini bulletin. I'm going to get Zach in on this now. Zach, what have you made so far to the reaction to some of these news stories that have been announced?
Yeah, let's start off with the James Cleverly interview this morning, which obviously GB News and other broadcasts conducted. James Cleverly was on the morning broadcast rounds for Kunzberg, Sophie Ridge, and Camilla Tomley, as well as Times Radio and others as well. But the main message question that he was asked this morning is about Nadeem Zahawi's tax affairs, because as you probably may have been aware this week, Nadeem Zahawi was decided to agree to a payoff about, I think it was about $4 million on his tax affairs that was left over. He called this an act of carelessness, but not a deliberate mistake. But it raised questions about the fact that Nadeem Zahawi has been owed money and dodging taxes whilst he was before, potentially during the middle of his chancellorship, the interim period where Rishi Sunak stepped down, and then Nadeem Zahawi was whisked in to help become Chancellor of the Exchequer for this short bit as well. You may remember that bit as well. But it looks like unknown questions about Nadeem Zahawi's tax affairs have come back to light again with this £4 million settlement between HMRC and himself. And excuse me there, James Cleverly was not really answering much the question this morning. And he didn't even suggests that that he had confidence in Nadine Zahawi, although he's not the prime minister making all the decisions about cabinet decisions and all that sort of thing. He's sort of, unlike other ministers that will go up on there in these broadcast rounds, he sort of suggested, that was up to Prime Minister to determine whether he had confidence in Nadine Zahawi as party chairman or not. And James Cleverly wouldn't answer the idea whether he did have, whether he supported Nadine Zahawi in the party chairmanship role at the moment, which is obviously a very serious role. It's obviously running the operation of the Conservative Party from with behind the scenes, getting the membership up and obviously getting its election campaign rolling. But yeah, it's not been pretty for Nadine Zahawi over these few days, especially the fact that he previously brought in lawyers to try and stop all these tax stories being published about them. And it turns out he did a careless error himself as well, which wasn't a really good sign on that as well. Moving on to that pension story, Charlie, as you said, it's obviously, it's been, that pension story is obviously it's been since 2011 as well. And obviously there's a lot of pensions that have not been used since the pandemic has sort of begun and everyone's sort of going to a little retirement. So it's obviously these pensions have obviously grandparents, obviously been helping with childcare as well as part of the state pension. And once they build it up as well, so it means an extra £3,000 to the pocket. So it's been running since 2011, meaning those who've not been making use can receive massive payouts. So yeah, it's important as part of the state pension scheme as well, for the older generation. And obviously this has been running around as well for quite a while now. So yeah, it's really important that, I suppose, in this way, this scheme continues for those that are using childcare or have to use childcare but haven't claimed yet as well. So I sort of agree with that story as well, and I think it's a crucial one in that many instances as well. And yeah, it's a crucial area. And the other one I think was, Charlie, let's go back to the other one, the next one before the other one as well. Get back on there just to figure out my brain. What was the last one?
Vladimir Putin's threat.
Yeah, Vladimir Putin. So in terms of Vladimir Putin, well, it's just I think it's bluster for now. It reminds me when we're saying when we're going to use powerful weapons that he sort of really doesn't have the ability to. So whatever he is sort of saying at the time, if he says this, then he's not going to do it. In many ways, so for example, the nuclear threats as well. I mean, it's not really more powerful weapons. It's a reference to nuclear weapons as well. The threat to use that. I'll be honest, it's just a load of bluff at the end of the day. It's not going to be anything meaningful. Then it's just really it's not going to happen, because he's the Russian president Vladimir Putin, that if he says one thing, he means the other. So he can use all these bluster and delivering to his audience as much as he can for state TV. But to be honest, it's not going to make a difference. Obviously, the Russia hates the US, they hate the UK, hates Ukraine, hates lots of very NATO countries at the moment, including NATO itself. So he's going to come up with these blustering defensive of himself, but they're pretty meaningless in terms of substance and meanings and actual reality of things as well. So to be fair, I wouldn't be worried about what he says for now, because it's quite frankly a load of old nonsense, really, to be fair, from him. But yeah, I mean, it's obviously we can't let it go unknown, but we obviously can't just brush it off. But at the same time, I wouldn't necessarily be worried about it, given the fact that whatever Putin says, he sort of doesn't really do in that instance as well.
Yeah. Well, we know the Wagner Group have been sanctioned, so that's all I can go for. We are going to bring you up to speed now with the latest quickly from the war in Ukraine. If you do like the new format, guys, with regarding to the news, please let us know. I have made a significant change to my show regarding the news at the start to give you guys a rundown of all the top stories. We did see the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson making a visit this week to Ukraine. It was only, I think, yesterday that he popped in. He said Ukraine should get all the tools they need to beat Russia. It was actually kind of an echoement to Winston Churchill there, talking about using all the tools they need to beat the Nazis back in 1940 when Germany invaded Britain. So, yes, he was pictured there. There's Boris Johnson pictured in a pretty chilly Ukraine today. This was in the town of Boryanka, which was coming under heavy bombardment from Russian forces this week. We also had French President Emmanuel Macron said on Sunday he does not rule out the possibility of sending Leclerc tanks to Ukraine. Okay. Named after a famous racing driver who races for Ferrari in Formula One. Very interesting indeed. The UK Foreign Secretary said the UK wanted to see Ukraine equipped with the Leopard 2 tanks, which will be used in Germany. They're yet to make a decision on that, which has sparked plenty of resignations, or a couple of resignations in Olaf Scholz's cabinet right now, as well. Poland's Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki criticised Germany's failure to supply tanks to Ukraine, saying it's unacceptable. And we also had that horrifying helicopter crash earlier this week where a few members of Vladimir Zelensky's inner circle unfortunately passed away, including his interior minister. My thoughts are with all those people who have suffered that helicopter crash. We don't even know what the cause of that was, whether it was a shot, something involved with the war, or whether that was just independent. Zach, what did you take away from some of this week's headlines in Ukraine?
Yeah, obviously, first of all, my thoughts were to the Interior Minister for that. That was a really awful helicopter crash that happened that killed the Interior Minister and several others on board as well. I think there's about 16 of those that were on board and killed, sadly as well. And it's a very devastating instance as well. And seeing members of the cabinet lose out to lives as well is really bad as well. Today's headlines and many others in the week of Ukraine and everything. You may have seen the certain old Boris Johnson out there. Interestingly, given that fact, you may think he's still prime minister if in fact he's been the one running out there and everything like that. But no, obviously, despite the fact as many hates you get for Boris Johnson and all the fans, he's good friends with Volodymyr Zelensky at the moment. It has been for the last year. So I suppose this trip, in any way, is just to sort of be a little special delegate for Rishi Sunak as well, to be to support the Ukrainian people as well. He obviously visited damaged town of Bordyanka, which is just outside the suburbs of Kyiv as well, which obviously been hit with lots of weapons, missiles as well from Russian drones and everything like that as well. So Rishi Sunak, what he said he was supportive of the visit. Now, also with what we've seen this week as well is a pressure on Germany. They have been pressured, and they've still not made a decision yet into whether they're going to send tanks to Ukraine. These are Leopard tanks. I should point out what Germany has sort of not made a decision of. So they're third generation tanks from the 1970s, the West German army, but they're used for many other purposes as well. They're one of the best tanks you can get in the world, really, to be fair, as well. And it's most reliable, most lethal, most good performing tanks out there. But the Germans have not made a decision yet on whether to send them to Ukraine. But and it's starting to raffle allies a little bit in many ways, because Poland wants to send some tanks that are similar to that to Ukraine. But it appears Germany has put some conditions on certain, whether we can bring tanks or not as well. And the US wants to bring certain tanks. Germany want the US to bring certain tanks if they're going to release Leopard tanks as well. And yeah, I mean, the other countries such as Poland and the smaller countries are really pushing the pressure on Germany to release these tanks, or Poland could go its own way, really, to be fair. I think Sweden and Finland are also trying to get their want to supply weapons as well, and especially Emmanuel Macron wanting to send potentially Leclerc tanks, which were not named after Charles Leclerc, by the way, I should point out. I mean, it's just ironic that they are called Leclerc tanks as well. Let me just tell you about these Leclerc tanks as well, because they are really important. They're third generation French tanks and manufactured by Nexus Systems as well. It was made on a Marshal Philippe Leclerc, a commander of the Free French Force who led the Second Armored Division in World War II. So actually, they're not named after racing a driver; they're named after World War II legends, really. To be fair, as well. So yeah, that's where it's all come from. But yeah, Germany could, if Germany stopped their little hold on things, and they really think they need to hurry up, quite frankly. And then they could get the Leopard, the Leclercs, and many other tanks to Ukraine, which could provide a good ground operation for Ukraine if we go through to the spring as well. And that's really important as well. So there's been other things as well. Russia claimed to make advances in Ukraine's Zaporizhia region. It looks like there's been a small offensive going on as well as there, and 15 settlements come under fire as well. And a bit of other news as well. I mean, if just going through what you've seen, Charlie, as well. I mean,
the Wagner Group have also been sanctioned. That was one of the things that was announced by, I think, the United States President Joe Biden the other day.
Yeah, so the Wagner Group are just basically Vladimir Putin's second little puppet, really, of army. It's like a mini army that Putin has inside Russia, and on the battle line in Ukraine, where they've mobilized forces. I wonder if it's full of these sanctioned people, really. Do you know those mobilization that Putin did initially a few months ago? I wonder if it's wonder if they're forces using that. But yeah, it's been sanctioned for its involvement in Ukraine. Not surprisingly, that's got received sanctions. It's been described as it's not really a terrorist group, but a criminal organization by the United States. Is understandable. I mean, the Wagner Group is just basically off ramp for Vladimir Putin, to be honest, and his little army. It's like an inner workings in many ways as well. But yeah, they're helping out in like Bakhmut, Solidar as well, and they're trying to really it's the sort of area that's sort of helping with the offensive there in many instances as well. But yeah, I mean, it's the right move to make. And I think the UK have sort of made some moves on that as well, I believe, as well. I might have been wrong. It might be in the Iran move or anything like that, but I think the UK would have made some moves on that as well at the same time as well. But yeah, that's pretty much what's going on. But yeah, the battleground is pretty fierce at the moment in Ukraine, especially in the Luhansk and Donetsk regions and Zaporizhia as well now, where it looks like there's an offensive going on there as well.
Yes, now, Zach, I'm going to play a video related to this because I think the United States Defense, I'm not sure, Jake Sullivan made a statement the other day in, I think, the White House press briefing room, I'm pretty sure. There was a statement by him the other day. I think it's one of like the US defense ministers or something. Obviously, Jake Sullivan has been following this very closely in the US. He's one of Biden's key presidential aides. I'm pretty sure I might have got his name wrong. I keep forgetting the name of the person who has been.
There's Antony Blinken, who's the Secretary of the Secretary of State, and then there's Lloyd Austin, is obviously the Defense Secretary, and Jake Sullivan's the National Security
Advisor. Yes, thank you. I keep forgetting his name, but yeah. So apparently there was a statement the other day which was made about some conclusive evidence which showed that Iran or North Korea was secretly giving Russia or these drones. Like, I heard this in the other day on like a press conference, and it sounded pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what this work is about personally as well, but there's obviously been a lot of meetings recently as well with with the US and everything. Like, there's a defense meeting Friday. Obviously, it was over the German thing as well. But yeah, I mean, the Allies have got to step up a little bit, I think, here, Charlie, as well. The Allies have really got to step up in many ways because Germany is sort of it's been slow, snailly slow. And I think the Allies are starting to get a little bit frustrated because I think, we previously complained that the French are the roadblock before. It appears it's the Germans now. I mean, they've relied on Russia a lot over these last few years, and obviously it's slow to get off their reliance. But they obviously need to sort of hurry up on, I think, in this instance as well, and get on with it, because the quicker these tanks are delivered, the quicker that Ukraine can get on these forces and sort of do their ground operative. Because at the moment, they're going to soon have the ability to obviously with these air defenses as well, they got from the United States, and soon the tanks. Ukraine, if they got the equipment, could turn this war around hopefully ahead of its defensive the Russian plans in the spring. But yeah, they need to hurry up. Really, Germany need to do to get weapons delivered and get Ukraine to advance in this war.
Oh, I can just confirm it was John Kirby who done the press conference as well. John Kirby was at the White House the other day doing a press conference where he is the National Security Council spokesperson. He was asked about the Wagner Group and the new actions the US government is taking. Have a listen to what he had to say just the other day.
John, I have two questions. First one on Wagner. What's your assessment on Wagner efficiency sets on the ground? Is Wagner better than the traditional Russian forces?
Well, Wagner would have you believe that. If you listen to Mr. Prigozhin and read his press releases, he would have you believe that he alone is achieving all the military victory in Ukraine. I will say this: they have been largely responsible for and in command of efforts in Bakhmut and that town north of Bakhmut called Soledar, both mining towns. Go figure. And that has caused, again, consternation with the Russian Defense Ministry. I will also say, and I've said this before, they have made incremental progress in both those areas. Now, we hold today that both towns are still contested. The Ukrainians haven't given them up. But there's no doubt that the Russians have made some incremental progress there. But they have done it at an extraordinary cost. And I'm not talking about Russian soldiers. I'm talking about Wagner convicts. I mean, greater than 90% of the thousands of casualties that Wagner alone, forget the Russian army for a minute, have sustained, have been convicts, have been ex-prisoners that they've just plucked out of jails and put into the fight with little or no training, no organizational capability whatsoever. So it has come at a cost. The last thing I'll say on this is, and I don't want to predict where it's going to go, but even if they are successful in Bakhmut or Soledar, it's not going to strategically change the dynamics on the battlefield. It's not going to set the Ukrainians back to a degree where they're all of a sudden on their back foot and they're losing. Now, obviously, the Ukrainians don't want to give up either town, and who could blame them? They're Ukrainian towns; they shouldn't be fighting for them, and we're trying to help them do that. But I think we need to keep in perspective what significance there may be, or in this case may not be, to either town falling. They are both mining towns, gypsum in Bakhmut and salt up in Soledar, and we think that also has a role to play in why Mr. Prigozhin is so adamant on pouring, just literally throwing bodies into a meat grinder to get these two towns. It's very much in keeping with his modus operandi in places like Africa, where he's going after mining rights and mining capabilities.
Thank you there to John Kirby for the statement there in the White House the other day. That was regarding the Wagner Group sanctions there on that issue. Moving on now to the sports news now, a lot earlier than I thought I was planning on having this on, but sports news, the sport briefing is back. We're going to go over today's Premier League action, which has seen plenty of titanic results over the weekend. Today's matches, the one that's just finished, Arsenal beating Manchester United 3-2 to continue their lead at the top of the Premier League table. We also had other results. Leeds and Brentford was a goalless draw today. And in the other match today, Manchester City's Erling Haaland scoring a hat-trick. 3-0 winners at Wolves. Other matches, Liverpool-Chelsea goalless draw. Both managers there under pressure. Leicester and Brighton was a 2-2 draw. Aston Villa beating Southampton 1-0. West Ham winning 2-0 at home against Everton. Frank Lampard is in big trouble. Bournemouth and Nottingham Forest are a 1-1 draw. And Crystal Palace and Newcastle also a goalless draw. Zach, what did you make to the latest football results?
Yeah, it's been a interesting weekend of football, I have to say, especially results. Let's start off with yesterday's, actually. One of the big games, Liverpool v Chelsea, it ended up with a 0-0 draw, really. It was a very unexciting match, quite frankly, as well. And I think it really sums up the team's forms this season. Chelsea were 1-0 up at one point, but got disallowed because of an offside decision. So it could have won them for the match for them as well. But yeah, I mean, it was an unremarkable match. To be fair, watching it, it wasn't really that fun at all. As well, I mean, they are, in fairness, those two 9th and 10th in the league. So this result, really, it just sums up their season at the moment. 9th and 10th, nil result. They're not getting, obviously a lot of injuries as well. Both teams got a lot of injuries, and it just proves how much both sides are struggling at the moment. I mean, if you look at it as well, this is now 2 wins from 5. Actually, two non-defeat. Two. Yeah, actually, I should correct that. Liverpool have actually got one. Been unbeaten in the last. 3 out of the 5 games they've been unbeaten. They've won 2 of them, drawn 1. But Chelsea, this is obviously a draw. They won the previous one, but yeah, out of their last 5 games, they only won 1 of them, as well, which is not great. And 2 defeats. Yeah, it just sums up really the season at the moment. Chelsea, they're both on 29 at the moment, and they're struggling at the moment really well. Aston Villa catching up. I should point out from behind as well, because Leicester City Brighton, it's a 2-2 draw. You have to say, from a Leicester perspective, they could have won that. They were behind at the start, 1-0. Then they got into the rim, and just tell you what happened during the match as well. I mean, it was Mitchell in the 27 minutes to score for Brighton. Mark Albrighton then came on early as well, scored in the 38 minutes. Then it was Harvey Barnes in the 63rd and Evan Ferguson for Brighton that managed to claw a point back for Brighton. A very, Leicester could have got a crucial 3 points there, but just lost as well. Southampton's woes continue, unfortunately, losing 1-0 to Aston Villa. Another huge loss for, I suppose, for Southampton. They are now still at the bottom of the table in 20th position, alongside Everton and Bournemouth, so not been a good result as well. Speaking of Everton, very shocking, very poor result. Well, Frank Lampard is going to be on the brink now. A 2-0 loss against West Ham, who was also struggling. It was a crunch match between these two. But it was a double from Jared Bowen. By the way, Jared Bowen, congratulations to him. He's going to have twins with Danny Dyer as well. So probably each of those goals was for for every girl is a baby. So he got 2 goals, 2 babies, twins. Good comparison there. Maybe cringe to some, but it's a good comparison in this instance. At the bottom half as well, Bournemouth and Nottingham Forest, another crucial match at the bottom as well. That was 1-1 draw as well. Goal from Jaden Anthony for Bournemouth and Sam Surridge in 83rd minutes of Nottingham Forest as well. Palace and Newcastle was a goalless draw yesterday as well. Newcastle could have got the opportunity to win there towards the end, but it still remains inside the top 4, thanks to Manchester United losing today. We'll get back to that in a moment. And today's matches were City against Wolves. City with a dominant 3-0 victory for them. It's pretty, Erling Haaland with another hat trick. Only now Alan Shearer scored more hat tricks in the season than Erling Haaland. It's simply incredible for Erling Haaland. The goals galore keeps going on. He's already matched last season's Golden Boot as well, which is quite stunning for the result for him. Leeds Brentford, another big match at the bottom for Leeds, 0-0 against Brentford. I think Brentford would be pretty pleased with that as well. They're progressing the game up the top half of the table. And today's stunning match, I have to say as well, Arsenal v Manchester United. That was a classic. 3-2. Arsenal managed to squeeze out as well. Eddie Nketiah with a 90th minutes goal. Arsenal went behind thanks to Marcus Rashford, and then Martinez in the 59th minute. Eddie Nketiah scored in the 24th and 90th, and Bakary Saka 53rd. Massive result for Arsenal there as well. It was an absolute match of ups and downs, draws and galores. It was brilliant. Arsenal, crucial major victory, 5 points ahead of Manchester City in the table. And there's one more match this weekend, which is tomorrow actually, from 8 o'clock. It's going to be Fulham against Spurs, struggling Spurs. Fulham have been pretty good this season as well. They could go ahead of Spurs if they win tomorrow. Fulham, they could go into 5th position, which would guarantee them a Europa League spot if the result holds for them. Which is obviously huge at the moment. But yeah, at the moment, Spurs are a little bit struggling. Lost like the last 2. Fulham have lost the last one. but won the 4 matches before that. So yeah, it's going to be a tasty London derby tomorrow, I think, as well, between the two sides. It's going to be difficult. I have to say, you can probably tell the win percentages is a 25% draw chance. The probability of Spurs winning is 45%, and Fulham is 30 at the moment. But it's going to be a crucial match tomorrow. The Premier League doesn't return until February now, but then next week instead we do get FA Cup fixtures, the 4th round, and it'll be highlighted on the Friday with the Manchester City and Arsenal in the 4th round. That is the key tie, and it will be a crucial big match because it will set the tone for the rest of the matches ahead, I think, as well.
Yeah.
Obviously, if they draw, it'll go to a replay, which obviously could be very interesting as well because they've obviously got to reschedule as well. But it includes Manchester City, Arsenal, Walsall, and Leicester on Saturday 20th at 12:30. A TBD because Acton and Bournemouth are still playing their postponed match. If that match goes to replay, then the league match gets postponed as well. And other fixtures include Southampton struggling Southampton against Blackpool at 3 as well. Fulham and Sunderland. Fulham taking on Sunderland. Preston North End against Spurs at 6 on next Saturday. Manchester United will take on Reading. They've met frequently in the prior task for. Brighton v Liverpool is Sunday 29th with Stoke Stevenage and Wrexham Sheffield, and then it will finish on for 30th with Derby County against West Ham United. So that's tied for the 4th round up ahead. As well in the Premier League will return on the 3rd of February with Fulham v Chelsea.
Yeah, lots of news. It is football was certainly the dominant sport this weekend, I have to say. As well, in the Rolex 24, Tom Blomqvist is on pole position for the Daytime 24. Zach, what have you made to that so far?
Yes, I forgot that it's happening obviously next week, but as you're probably aware, it's happening. Yes, it's with Tom Blomqvist in the new GTP era has took pole as well. It was only 2 of the new GTP tires took the track in Saturday's 2 hours evening session because due to poor weather. Sebastian Borg dual day as well as in the 01 and 2 as well, but that was a crucial result for them. But Tom Blomqvist as well was on pole for that one. He's ahead of Matt Campbell, Felipe Nasser, Matt Christian in the Porsche, Rick Taylor 3rd, Sebastian Bourdais 4th, Erling Barman 5th in the Cadillacs, Pipo Di Lorini 6th. That includes Jack 18 in that one as well. Philip Engel is 7th with Colton Hogan including that great 4-car lineup. BMW's in the 8th. Orkin Gibson's 9th. Ben Kenton is Quinn. 10th is Orkin Gibson. 11th, 12th, and 13th. So these are all the Orkin Gibson groups as well. But that includes Guido Malone 10th as well. Stephen Thomas 11th. Franco Pereiro 12th. George Kurtz 13th. It looks in 14th, which includes Petro Fittipaldi as well, and Austin Cendric. And yeah, basically the top 15 rounds up by Dennis Alderson, which includes Ed Jones as well in that team. So yeah, it's been a truant session, unfortunately because of the weather. But yeah, Tom Blomqvist is on pole position for the Rolex 24 hours, which takes place next week as well. Next Saturday it starts as well. I believe that will be around about 2 p.m. Eastern time, which is about 7 p.m. UK time for that one.
Yeah, with plenty of action in next week's Rolex 24. We'll announce the winner on the show next week. We'll keep update with all the action as we come along. I'm going to move on now to Conversation Corner because I'm going to be talking all about the Blitz tonight on my show. I thought I would share this with you because it's another history moment in this country, and we are ahead of schedule as well, which is important. So the Blitz was initiated in 1940 by none other than Adolf Hitler of Germany, who bombed London for 57 consecutive nights in September. But how did it all start? Obviously, we covered once on this show the start of the codenamed Battle of Britain, Operation Sea Lion. But the Blitz was the bombing campaign that would ultimately test Britain's air defences during the time. The Luftwaffe were very successful in destroying many cities across the UK, including London, which suffered the heaviest damage. Now, the term was first used to the British press. It was originated for the term Blitzkrieg, which is German word for lightning war. The Germans conducted mass attacks against industrial targets, including town cities, beginning raids on London to weekend Battle of Britain in 1940. A battle for daylight superiority, should I say, was between the Luftwaffe Royal Air Force as well. Adolf Hitler and also Rhine Marshal Hermann Goering, Commander-in-Chief of the Luftwaffe, ordered a new policy from the 6th of September. From the 7th of September 1940, London was systematically bombed 56 of 57 nights. Most notable, a large daylight attack occurred on the 15th of September. This was a horrible event, and you can just see the numbers down here. The statistics prove what happened. Between 40 to 43,000 civilians were killed. 46,000 to 139,000 were injured. 2 million homes were destroyed. 60% of these were in London. In terms of air crew, 3,263 air crew. In the summer, it was 2,665. That was between the summer of 1940 and the May 1941, that figure. The Luftwaffe's campaign involved a picture here. This was a Heinkel HE-111 bomber flying over London. You can just see here it hitting its targets, including a pretty, I have to say, that's quite an interesting picture, flying over the River Thames. You can see the Thames in the background there, and the plane in the foreground, literally flying over. And it must have been pretty horrifying for the British public, having to listen to the air raid sirens and then seeing these weird, to them, sort of these weird black specks appearing in the sky. They were actually German bombers flying over. Now, Zach, what is your memory? What is your memories from this historic event? And do you think the Luftwaffe's bombing tactics, do you think they were effective at trying to stop Britain in terms of making its economy suffer?
Oh, at the end of the day, no, it didn't affect him because the British spirit was up high. I mean, the reason why this is all happened. So it started on the 7th of September 1940. So this was 456. They know it as Black Saturday, really, to be fair. As well, this is basically the start of the Blitz. So this lasted about 8 months, 5 days, between September 1940 and May 1941, which is obviously the war in Ukraine has lasted longer than this, unfortunately, as well. So but there was little Blitz periods as well. So there was the Luftwaffe, that was the German lot, bombed the city for 56 of the 57 days as well. This is so the London Blitz. This was the worst one. It was bombed pretty much daily until from 1941 during May and April as well. So it lasted a long period. But there was also other periods as well where not only London was bombed, but there was also other areas like northern areas like Liverpool, Birmingham, Glasgow, Plymouth. So all went
Coventry,
Coventry as well. So it was, they had so many, different areas where it was bombed. It was not just London. People need to sort of forget that as well. But there was many other areas that sort of got affected by this. I mean, a lot of it. 17 of them were affected as well, and there was like thousands of explosives that were dropped in these cities. And it wasn't just our areas; it was like rural areas as well that got affected as well. But mostly it was mainly towns where the Germans thought there was strategic infrastructure that could be affected in many ways, but it really didn't make too much of a difference at the end of the day. The London was obviously the one that got bombed the most because obviously the capital, really, to be fair, as well, and it's obviously the most popular area as well. So it was 71 times, and there was 18,000 tons of high explosive bombs were dropped in the city at the period as well. Now, the reason why this all started was because the Germans initially wanted to destroy important Air Force bases and aircraft factories so that the Brits, stopped being able to develop them to affect the Germans as well. This is the whole reason. This to destroy their infrastructure, basically, to stop bombing them. And they're to the point where Britain couldn't build their own infrastructure to sort of fight back against the Germans. And therefore, they'll be stuck in a position where they couldn't be able to fight or anything like that. But so it didn't target civilian areas. because Hitler wanted, a peace agreement from Britain where, Hitler get all his wants, and, Britain would be stuck under German power and everything like that. And then the 24th of August, there was a pilot, a Luftwaffe pilot headed from Military, flew off course and mistakenly dropped their bombs in central London. The Brits reacted, saying it was deliberate, and then they bombed the German capital, Berlin. And that as a result of that, it started this bombing in London in many ways as well, because the Brits germed Berlin as well. So it was this little day-by-day attack of what was going on in London as well. I mean,
just seeing this image here, showing you some of the wreckage of a German bomb, could be creating this crater here, destroying. I mean, a London bus literally up against the.
Sorry, it must be. Go on, Charlie.
It was just. I mean, that image just shows you the devastation of what's happened.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's a bus there, as you can see. That was obviously caught up with it. That's in the building or something there. Obviously been trapped up as well in that building. But you'd be mistaken from that image thinking that the bus crashed in, had somersaulted, crashed into that building. But no, it was the German bomb, really, as well. That as well. And, the result of this, Charlie, was just huge amount of damage, really. There was 43,500 civilians that was killed in this, 139,000 left seriously injured. And because of the bombing raid that Germany did, it resulted in 60% of homes in London destroyed. Only 40% weren't affected. 2 million houses were damaged as well. And it only stopped all this bombing on the 11th of May 1941 because, the spirit of the Brits really didn't change, really, to be fair. So the Germans tried to invade Russia instead. And focus on the resources there, but it didn't make a difference at the end of the day, because what happened was the Germans still lost the war, and it was because of what happened everywhere else and everything like that. But this is what happens when you although they claimed, Germany didn't claim at the time to think it was deliberate, they pretty much caused a deliberate act to have bombs on the city of London. And a mass bombing, but in many ways. So yeah, I mean, it's resulted in lots of casualties, lots of deaths, and a lot of civilian injuries. It happened during daytime. It happened nighttime. The 10th, 11th of May was probably the biggest ones a lot as well. You may have seen a lot of films about it as well. But yeah, it caused lots of civilian damage. But at the end of the day, and I suppose for the benefit of us, we are, still British in many ways because of what our spirit and everything like that, and what our resilience to the war. And
there's a picture of Parliament there, not exactly looking the original Parliament being destroyed by a German bomb. I mean, that's the heart of UK democracy right there, and that's what That's what they done to us.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It said when Parliament almost came to Stratford, because obviously all these bombings. Obviously Parliament nowhere to go. It had to be obviously relocated somewhere as well. So I'm just wondering as well, I always wondered, where did Parliament relocate meet during the war? So they convened at Church House in Westminster in between 1940 and 1941 because they were worried that the chains might be bombed as well. Then there was a bomb in the old Palace Yard as well, and then on the 18th of December, a bomb to the south and east side as well. The Commons chambers were destroyed on the 10th of May 1941. The roof of the Westminster Hall was set on fire as well. So it was decided as well that because the Commons chambers hit bomb, they couldn't save both. It was concentrating on saving the Hall as well. So the commendation. They moved to Church's Annex and sat there from 13th of May, 1941 as well, until 1950. The Commons met in the Lord Chamber, whilst the Lord met in the Robbing Room as well, which was obviously a fact kept secret as well. So to reach the temporary Commons Chamber in the Lord, the Speaker of Procession had to pass through the central lobby. It's actually remained such a popular feature that practice retained after the Commons moved back into the new chamber in 1950. So yeah, it's still a practice today to get to somewhere, you move from one place and then to the other. But yeah, it's that's where you wonder where all Parliament moved and everything like that. So they didn't actually move far from where the chamber was, but because the chamber was being bombed. So I think it's quite brave that they actually stayed in London during the time all this is happening. I mean, that's very impressive given the fact that London was a key bombing area as well. So yeah, that's really important.
Yeah, and Winston Churchill as well. Before we move on, Winston Churchill obviously was the responsible for leading the war effort here in Britain, particularly through the Blitz. And I remember watching some of the speeches he made during, like, in Parliament, on the BBC radio broadcasts. I mean, Zach, for us during the Second World War, and comparing Volodymyr Zelensky to now in Ukraine, Winston Churchill was the man who, in my view, saved Britain and saved the Allies from eternal defeat.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, his heroic effort to, sort of, lead his country, lead during the war, as well, and just lead the actual efforts and strategic decisions, and saving his country from total annihilation was key. And his cool, calm nature, his good decisions, his critically important decisions was so crucial to making sure that Britain won this war. And it was so important that they did win this war as well, because without it we would have been speaking German by now, as you probably may not or may not be aware. But yeah, I mean, that's debatable in so many ways, but yeah, that's what could have happened in many instances as well. But yeah, Winston Churchill, legendary figure. Once a legendary figure, always a legendary figure.
Yeah, well, that's all on the World War II now and the Blitz. Moving on now to the Charlie's Good News, talking about the Apprentice UK cartoons. And I have to say, in terms of one of the biggest failures I've ever seen by any candidate in this process, and if not probably the whole of The Apprentice, there was a cartoon with children of disabilities with no hands or feet. I mean, why would you be making a cartoon with people that have no feet from Team Apex? Team Infinity ended up winning it, courtesy of Avi, who nearly got fired the other week, leading the team to victory. They did mix the teams up, as I said, and unfortunately, I predicted at the start Gregory Epps would have probably been one of the favourites. It turned out he didn't last more than 3 weeks, and he got fired because he didn't contribute. To be honest, it was one of the easiest firings of the series. The Tycoon was just basically helping out the Antigua trip with the history, but unfortunately insisting the task wasn't for him. They did have to go to I had to create it, obviously, all like screenplay it, record the script and that, and used animation as well, voiceovers. So they created the cartoons. One was Yogita the giraffe. The other one, as I said, was Femi and Faye, the two people obviously with disabilities. But Femi and Faye didn't exactly go plain sailing. So what did you make to the Last Apprentice task?
To be honest, right, okay, I may not be a kid, and I may be talking this from a 21-year-old perspective and everything like that, as well. But yeah, I generally, they were both bad. I could not understand. They were seriously both poor efforts. I mean, the key one, and again, I can't even pronounce it. I don't know if I can't even pronounce it. I don't know how a 2, 3, or 4-year-old to pronounce it, because they're only in the early stages of English. I don't expect you to pronounce the key to the whatever. Oh, just don't. But yeah, in all seriousness, they were both bad. I wouldn't even sell them to my audience. They were both bad. The Femi and Faye thing, I get the idea about it, but the execution was just so bad. I mean, there's no hands, no feet, no fingers.
Oh no!
So, and also as well, it looks like there may have been some kind of indirect discrimination on this one as well, because the point of that Faye is right. Okay, is that she's in a wheelchair and she can't go down a slide. Now, I see the purpose of creating something like that, like, you know, to conclude, to try and get her involved in any ways, but there is still discrimination because, you know, she can't do it. It is the whole point. The Femi can do whatever he wants, the other one can't. So it was poor, and then the Nikita one, I thought had a storyline under it, and I thought like had a little bit more excitement and a bit more, you know, sort of understanding of the audience, but the name let me down, so I wasn't too overall impressed. But this one was just lacked in vision, lacked in spark, and just a bit basics. Uh, I didn't like either of them, to be fair. It was a really bad, poor task from both teams. But the end result is who would be the one that get fired, and the one out of them was Gregory, who, you know, it looks very smart and got glass. Looks like he wears smart glasses, so it looks like an absolute professor. But was he a professor? No, he was a portrait, more like an anyway, just a standstill portrait, not just there for viewing purposes, not contributing to much to the task. Anisha really was a bit argumentative. Reese was terrible at the project, but Greggy had, if he couldn't contribute to that, then he couldn't contribute to other tasks as well. So Lord Trigger got rid of Gregory. Yeah, I'm not sure about that one. I mean, he could have contributed to the other tasks, but if you're not going to contribute to this task, then, you know, how you expect to contribute to others as well? You know, anything useful. Reese, he was blamed for the story. Denisha's poor leadership skills as well was done. I believe Denisha is going to be the project manager for next task.
Yes, she will be, yeah.
Because Lord Sugar has been set her to be the project manager for next task. And the next task next week is going to be done in, I believe, in Brighton, I believe.
Yeah.
As well. So I believe as well. So they're going to, I think, Brighton to from some item picking I think as well, item picking tasks where the candidates have got to pick items that represent Brighton in many ways, which obviously is really important. You know, identifying the skill and the culture of a city is, you know, is extremely important. The candidates, they need skill 9 items synonymous with the area as well in Brighton. And they must negotiate 9 items within the area to get it. They must get it for the cheapest and the lowest price. And as well, the 2 skills might the lowest price wins. So one candidate will get fired in this one as well, but it's about getting items at the cheapest, then selling off as well. It's being good use about your money and everything like that. Good use about you selling and profiting and getting the lowest possible price. And it will be and Brighton will be the task next week to get 9 of those items. And it has to be 9, otherwise you pretty much fail the task otherwise. In that instance as well. But yes, next week is about discount buying, getting cheap items that feel relevant to the city, that must be relevant. You must get for low price or negotiate for low price. And those with the cheapest win. Those with the one of them is going to get fired next week, but that's next week's episode.
Yeah, that'll be Thursday at 9 o'clock, just to let you know The Apprentice UK returns. On BBC Two and BBC One, of course, as well. Moving on now to the papers, where we've got plenty of newspaper headlines to round up. A couple of tomorrow's papers have already just been released, which is the newspaper going for energy firms hit back at preppy meter ban with threat of higher bills. This comes as the business secretary orders companies to stop foreseeably installing payment, but says there's a fundamental problem that is millions that can't afford to pay for it. We also have The Guardian going for Britain's forecast to reach £1 billion export targets in 15 years in the wake of Brexit. And the Metro goes, Boris bank chum, call for a probe into claims B boss got him a XPM loan or something. Interesting there. So what have you made so far to the current papers?
So there's only about 3 of them out so far, I think, at the moment, but I think there's obviously be more as we go along. But still, the eye. Energy firms hit back at prepay meter ban with threats of higher bills. So the business secretary has written to companies today to basically force companies to start installing prepayment meters to customers and pass it on to obviously customers in many ways as well. Because obviously what happens is that some of them are on prepaid meters as well, which is obviously unfortunate But what happens is obviously they're very costly, and they add to the actual overall bill cost for customers overall. So Grant Schatz, they feel like this has been ripped off. I know that Shadow Chancellor sort of identified this as an area as well, which they think customers are being ripped off. But what happens is the firms are now saying, well, if you do this, we're going to pass that just back to the customer even more in the future. UK's biggest gas and electricity retailer claim that without the meters, the unpaid debts will build up. They'll have to recoup the customer bill through rising price caps. That'd be what they claim is one problem of removing this. As well, Mr. Intervention comes to investigation and courts were waving through warrants to force fit meters at home, struggling families and then be left without power. As well. So yeah, this is what they're saying is, let's just do the premium payments, but if you don't, we'll just pass on to customers in more over on a longer term, which is costly for the customers in many ways, because obviously the bills have been high this year. Obviously, inflation is slowly starting to get down a little bit now. The last time it was 9.5%, I think it was 10.5%. It's 10.7.
Yeah.
So slowly, gradual signs of inflation coming down, but it's still very costly. And energy bill prices are now fixed until April, and then they're going to change from there onwards, with possible hikes as well. But yeah, it's a big problem as well for the energy firms and the customers. I mean, there's a bit of both trying to dig out from what's happened there. The Guardian. They're going on about Brexit again, will you believe it or not? Ministers have been accused of leading a record of failing and broken promises after internal forecasts show Britain will be 15 years late in achieving its 1 trillion annual export target after being hit by Brexit. So UK government hit this, wants to hit this target of £1 trillion export as an international sort of leader in the export market. But what this report is saying is that inside government is that this target to be hit 15 years later than planned because of Brexit, the consequences of Brexit. It underlined how difficult British ministers found it to make the lofty predictions Brexit made about international trade after leaving the EU. Yeah, well, what do you expect, really, to be fair? I think it was expected in many ways, quite frankly, as well, all these problems with trade and everything like that, and I'm not really surprised as well. So it's not surprising. They're also got, obviously, Boris Johnson pictures there on Ukraine, but there's also a story yesterday which was broke by the Sunday Times, which was about a possible conflict of interest between the appointment of the new BBC chairman, Richard Sharp, and Boris Johnson's appointment with him, because it appears that Johnson made some sort of Richard Sharp made some sort of made a £800 million loan to him over something as well. I can't remember which it exactly was. But there was some sort of loan deal that was made between Richard Sharp and Boris Johnson as well. And before he was recommended for the job, it's actually £800,000, I should say. And Labour have called investigation this after arranged a guarantee of a loan up to £800,000 weeks before he was recommended for the job by then Prime Minister. So there's possibly a conflict of interest in the fact that Richard Sharp had been helping out Boris Johnson before he was appointed the role. There's lots of accusations saying there's a conflict of interest here as well, and whether that be whether that Richard Sharp declared all the interests to the standards that obviously appoints the BBC chairman and helps recommend BBC chairmen as well. But there apparently wasn't declarations made and all that sort of thing. So yeah, it looks fishy, I think, in many ways as well. Charting this story because it's just it's like, we'll give you money here. I'll give you a job as well. It does look a bit dodgy, I must say. It really does look a bit dodgy. James Cleverly was on the broadcast round defending this morning, saying that he did nothing wrong.
Yeah,
and he was brought on board because of merits as well. So Richard Sharp has sort of said it was not a big deal. So what big deal? Richard Sharp never sought any financial advice to Boris Johnson, nor had Mr. Johnson sought any financial advice for him. For that's the spokesman for Boris Johnson actually as well. Johnson dismissed reports as rubbish, and he says his financial arrangements has been declared properly well. It wouldn't be the first time that happened. That also makes the front page of the Metro as well. Court of Proven claim BBC boss got ex-PM loan. as well. That's obviously a picture from when he was up in Ukraine as well. BBC, Boris Banchum. That's obviously Richard Sharp as well. So yeah, it's a lot about conflicts of interest here, really, to be fair as well. Because obviously the money and everything like that. I think it looks a bit suspicious and everything as well. And there should be investigation of these sort of things, because if you're just giving out loans and everything, exchanging money, it makes it look like there could be some sort of fishy deal going on, and that's not really good at all. As well, it's a very serious matter in this instance as well. There's not many front pages out for tomorrow, I must say, as well. But let's go through some of the other ones whilst we're waiting for the others. Probably not going to come out tonight as well. The Sunday people talk about the Met Police case as well.
Yes.
Obviously, this is David Carrick's with the shocking detail this week, Charlie, of the fact that he got away with so many abuses of rape, sexual assault, and and the fact that he was still a serving Metropolitan Police officer. I don't understand how on earth could let this happen. The fact that he was being given nicknames as well, it's an appalling bad oversight. As the fact that nobody in the Metropolitan Police sought to, see this guy for what he was. He's a serial rapist. Is what he joined the force in 2001. He worked as an police officer in protection in 2009. He then initially suspended as well, but he took victims on trips to Downing Street, and it's just unbelievable how nobody saw the cases and suspensions of him, and still continue to be a serving Metropolitan Police officers. Absolutely unbelievably so bad. It really is. It's a terrible case as well. The Sunday Mirror goes for Prince Harry's flight instructor said the Duke's cockpit heroic memory dramatized. This is the even the Daily Mirror seems to be turning against Prince Harry now, interestingly as well. As well, this is obviously the fact that he claimed in his book he killed 25 Taliban people whilst duty in Afghanistan. It's not the greatest thing to boast about. As well, it's a really shocking thing as well. And I also want to highlight, just before we move on to the Sunday Telegraph as well. As you may have seen, the coronation schedule for the King's coronation has been released. For a 3-day event. Saturday is going to include the coronation. Sunday is going to include a big lunch of some sort, like we did have in the Platinum Jubilee. And then Monday is going to be a bank holiday, a day of volunteering as well. The celebrations will reflect modern multicultural Britain. The King intends to place refugees and the NHS at the centre of the diverse coronation as well, which is going to happen on Saturday. I think it's going to be 6th of May, I think, something like that.
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
I remember the dates now if I can get it up on my thing. 6th of May, the coronation. Bank holiday Monday is on the 8th as well. There's going to be bank holiday on the 1st and the 8th. So, the 6th is going to be coronation day, the 7th is going to be lunches, and the 8th is going to be a day of volunteering. That's a bank holiday Monday as well. So, that's all the schedule come out as well. And that's the papers for Sunday and for tomorrow.
They're all the papers. We'll be doing the review again next week. Time now for a look at the heroes and villains of the week. Well, I'm going to start off with the heroes of the week. One of my nominations is going to go to the ex-Prime Minister Boris Johnson for making the trip out to Ukraine this week. Because not only a lot of world leaders have been doing it, and I think Boris Johnson deserves credit for what he's done this week, going out there to Ukraine as well. Volodymyr Zelensky also gets another nomination for addressing the WEF this week as well, saying that the world must do more to help arm Ukraine with tanks. We know this week Challenger 2s have been coming out to Ukraine. I'd like to give the UK appreciation for that, because I think it is so important right now that we actually help Ukraine when it comes to supplying them with weapons as well. It was also Chinese New Year celebrations today, so all those who took part in the Chinese New Year celebrations also get my heroes of the week. My villains of the week this week, well, one of the villains of the week happened in the United States this week. There's been another horrendous shooting this week, we can confirm to you that at least 10 people have been killed in a mass shooting in Monterey Park, California. A driver dead in a van linked to a Lunar New Year mass shooting. I have that. Just going to get that up for you right now, guys. There has been another horrifying shooting taking place in the United States. And I believe that, as I said, this is in Los Angeles, California. Authorities have breached a white van in Torrance, believed connected to a gunman who opened fire at a ballroom dance studio in Monterey Park on Saturday night, killing 10 people, injuring 10 others, just before 1 p.m. Sunday. A SW-18 swarmed the vehicle, smashed its windows in the parking lot of Tokyo Central, a Japanese grocery store near southwest corner of Hawthorne and Cipavilia Boulevards. At least 2 bullets hit the driver's side window prior to the approach, and driver slumped over the steering wheel. Multiple law enforcement said that the Times driver died of self-inflicted gunshot wound. LA County Sheriff Robert Luna did not immediately confirm whether the individual was in the van, suspected shooter. This is a continuation of horrifying crime in Los Angeles, California. It is horrible. California certainly is not a nice place for crime in the United States. Another nomination this week goes to Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, for unjustifiable reasons to introduce ULEZ charges in London. He was grilled on this multiple times this week during committees, with the Mayor of London still going for the rigorous approach, which will affect Londoners' small and large businesses, as many more people who do not have a car under the ULEZ regulations will have to pay. So if you've got a car maybe as old as a 2010 or 2005, whatever, Renault Clio, whatever, you will not be able to enter the congestion zone. So, yeah, not ideal. Is that what have you made to the nominations I've mentioned so far?
I mean, fair enough. I mean, that's Sadiq Khan things. It'll be an interesting one to see how that develops the next few weeks as well, given the fact that he may have not been so truthful about the reasons for introducing this ULEV. Obviously, the expansion of the the emission zones and everything like that across London as well. It's going to be interesting to see about that one. Time for my heroes this week. Well, I'm going to do one hero. I'm going to give mine this week to Andy Murray, and I'll tell you why. For instance, you may have seen the second round Australian Open. Obviously, he got knocked out in the third, but the second round is the reason why I'm going to give it to Hero of the Week. He's obviously got obviously still hip at the moment because he's had a hip replacement as well because of his injuries and everything like that. He was 2 sets down in his second round. Andy Murray was as well. He took part in probably one of the longest matches in probably the Australian Open history for a long time. In the second round, he took part against Tanu Kolakakis of Australia as well. This match lasted, I think, over 4 hours 45 minutes and ended up ending at 4:30 a.m. in the morning Australia time. But he was 2 sets down. He lost the first set 4-6, and then 6-4, 7-7 in tiebreak, and then he came back to another tiebreak and then some of the stunning stuff he did there, including some of the volleys, was just unbelievable. Given the fact he's not got like a metal hip and everything like that, which obviously restricts your ability to move and run it a lot more. His results were simply incredible. He came from 2 sets down to win the match, 4-6, 6-7, 7-6, 6-3, and then 7-5 in a 4-hour match with that hip. Utterly stunning in the second round. He did unfortunately lose the third round, I'm afraid, against Matteo Berretti of Italy. So he lost 3-6, 3-6, 7-4, 7-6, and then 6-7 in the final tiebreak. But honestly, Andy Murray did a stunning job. And, with that hip, it was credible what he did for moments there. So he gets the start of the week. And I've got 4 villains this week, Charlie. First of all is Rishi Sunak. He got a fixed penalty.
Yes, I heard about this.
Honestly, Rishi Sunak got another fixed penalty notice, you may say, not for Partygate, but because he was caught on video, his own video, by the way, not wearing a seatbelt. That came with a £100 fixed penalty notice, which I expect he's going to be paying. If he doesn't pay that, he's £500, by the way, if he doesn't pay that. as well. But yeah, he was caught on video not wearing a seatbelt when he was up in Lancashire as well, as part of the Levelling Up program fund that was put on Instagram, and he was filmed not wearing a seatbelt. Lancashire police quickly jumped on that and gave him a fixed penalty notice of £100. The thing is, you got to wear a seatbelt when you're driving. Whether you're the passenger or the driver, you have to be wearing a seatbelt. It doesn't matter. No matter how famous or powerful you are, you've got to be wearing a seatbelt in the car for everyone's safety, all that sort of thing. David Carrick is villain number 2 for obviously his hideous serial rapist crimes and everything like that over the years, and I don't know how the Metropolitan Police found to overlook his ridiculous and unworthy positions as well. He's been dismissed from the police, thankfully, but my God, how long did it take for that to happen as well? Nadine Zahari is number 3 for me for his tax affairs. The fact that he wasn't totally honest about his tax affairs, and HMRC had to agree to £4 million payout conversation. The fact he was, not really good at his filing his tax affairs, and potentially whilst he was doing this happened when his chancellor as well, shows a complete lack of judgment from his part to take the role. And obviously the fourth one is the shooter in California, I'm afraid, as well, for that really horrible shooting and everything like that as well. It was utterly mad, the actions of that. But yeah, so Andy Murray gets the heroes, and then the 4 villains this week are, as you're probably aware, Rishi Sunak, Nadine Zahari, David Carrick, and the shooter in California.
Yeah, horrible event. I just have to say, what can Gavin Newsom fix crime in California? Please do. If you're still governor over there, that's all I can say. And that's it for the Charlie Tolhurst show tonight. Thank you so much for listening. Enjoy the rest of your week. We'll be back again next weekend for more important news roundups. Take care, everyone. Good night.